Next presenters from the Ontario Energy Board, Ms. Aldred, Mr. Antonopoulos, Ms. Band, Ms. Bishop, and Mr. Houston. Welcome, colleagues. Please be seated. Do introduce yourselves individually, and please begin now.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Marianne Aldred. I'm the General Counsel and Vice President Strategic Policy for the OEB. Rosemary Leclerc, the Chair and CEO of the OEB, is out of the country today and therefore not able to attend. I would like to introduce the members of the OEB's executive team who are with me here today. I have Brian Houston, who is Vice President of Consumer Protection and Industry Performance, Martine Band, Associate General Counsel, Ted Antonopoulos, Director of Rates, and Kieran Bishop, Manager of Strategic Policy. And we appreciate being invited to speak to you today. The OEB is an independent regulatory body that makes decisions and provides advice to the government in order to contribute to a sustainable, reliable energy sector and to help consumers get value from their natural gas and electricity services. The OEB has broad oversight responsibilities set out in legislation. We license market participants and establish standards of conduct and service. We approve major infrastructure investments. We approve the revenues required by 69 LDCs and 5 transmission companies to enable them to serve 5 million customers across the province. And we've been setting electricity prices for residential and small business customers for over 10 years. Our core regulatory function is focused on ensuring that energy consumers are seeing the highest possible value for the dollars they spend on their monthly bill. This is balanced with the need to ensure appropriate investments are made to sustain the system those customers rely on. And we have a long history of doing just that. While the OEB is not the architect of the government's proposed Fair Hydro Plan, Bill 132 would, if passed, give the OEB some new responsibilities and affect how we exercise some of our existing responsibilities. Our role in implementing the proposed Fair Hydro Plan is outlined at a high level in Bill 132. Much of the detail is expected to be set out in regulations. The bill contemplates a role for the OEB in implementing the government's plan to lower electricity bills by 25% for a typical residential consumer, and a role in implementing the plan to hold rate increases for residential ratepayers to the rate of inflation. In addition, Bill 132 contemplates that the OEB will have the following new responsibilities: setting the charge by which the clean energy adjustment will be recovered from consumers, approving fees that can be charged by OPG in its capacity as the financial services manager, ensuring that licensed electricity distributors and unit submeter providers abide by the Act, implementing the government's plan to expand and enhance the rural or remote electricity rate protection program, implementing the government's plan for a new First Nations on-reserve delivery credit, and setting rates to enable the ISO to recover any funding shortfalls to the extent that the amounts are not transferred to the OPG financing entity and financed in the capital markets. As the agency tasked with giving effect to these elements of the proposed Fair Hydro Plan, OEB staff has provided technical advice to government on implementation issues. We've done so based on our experience and our expertise in the sector in order to ensure that the government's policy direction and objectives can be implemented efficiently by both the OEB and those entities we regulate. While Bill 132, if passed, would affect how we do our work in some respects, it is not intended to limit the OEB's mandate to set just and reasonable rates for electricity distributors and transmitters. The government fully expects that the OEB will continue to exercise that mandate in the public interest as we do today. That expectation is set out in a letter from the Minister that is attached to the report that was posted on our website when we issued new RPB prices effective May 1st, 2017. As the committee members will know, these prices included a portion of the electricity bill reductions proposed under the Fair Hydro Plan. This is in keeping with our normal practice. We set RPP prices based on forecasts, and we include significant price changes that may occur in the period because of the smoothing benefits for consumers. This is one example of how the OEB, as the independent regulator, protects the interests of consumers. We do the same when we set distribution rates. Since 2009, we have kept annual distribution rate increases near the rate of inflation. We will continue that work in the public interest. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today, and we would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Aldred. To the government, Mr. Delaney.
Thank you very much, Chair. The OEB ranks utility performance. In your experience, does it matter a great deal if a utility is owned by a local municipality or more broadly held when it comes to how you rate them and how you score them?
Certainly when we set rates for utilities, we are the rate-setting process is not affected by ownership. So public ownership or private ownership, rates are set in the same way.
Okay. So to boil it down to a very simple question then, one that we've heard a few times earlier today, does the ownership structure of Hydro One have any impact on rates?
The ownership structure of Hydro One does not affect the way in which rates are set by the board.
If
The ownership structure of Hydro One does not affect the way in which rates are set by the OEB.
Does not affect.
Does not affect. We've set rates for the natural gas utilities, which are privately owned, for about 60
Thank
years.
you. If the legislation as tabled is passed in more or less this form, what would be the process for a summer rate review to ensure that these savings reached consumers as soon as possible?
So if the legislation is passed, the OEB will have 15 business days to reset the RPP prices for July 1, and those rates will be implemented over the summer by the LDCs as soon as they can.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. To the PC side, Mr. Smith.
So many questions, so little time. Has the OEB actually directed local distribution companies to start advertising the rate reduction?
No, the OEB has not directed anything like that.
Okay. Given that the minister has the ability to calculate what should be prescribed as a clean energy cost, and OPG has the responsibility for accepting that calculation and paying it, how is the OEB more than anything but just a rubber stamp here?
The OEB will continue to set distribution rates in the independent adjudicative process that it's always done so. The GA refinancing is the mechanics of that refinancing are through the RPP price setting, which is the commodity side of the bill.
Okay, in order for this securitization to take place, it requires a dedicated revenue stream equal to repay the debt issue. Are we going to be faced with yet another cost on bills that OEB has no ability to regulate?
I think the details about the eventual recovery of the revenue stream are still to be determined under the legislation.
Is it fair to say there's a debt retirement charge that will have to be incurred?
No, I wouldn't put it that way.
How would you put it?
I think the minister will determine the arc of repayment of the costs over time. The OEB will set commodity rates as it's directed in accordance with the legislation that exists at the time that we have to set them.
Given this, this may mean a separate line item of as much as $22 on bills, according to a document that we received from a whistleblower on bills in years to come, is OEB prepared to sign off on this plan anyway?
The OEB is a regulator and a government agency, and it is governed by its legislation and the framework that is put in place by the legislature, and we will abide by the legislation and abide by the law.
There have been a lot of questions about the distance between government and various agencies. Can you just speak to the independent nature of the OEB?
The OEB acts independently, and its core function is, as you know, to set distribution rates, transmission rates, approve infrastructure. Those processes all happen through independent, quasi-judicial hearings. We have interveners who appear. It's a court-like setting. So that is an independent exercise of our core function.
So when the 8% reduction, when the 8% reduction was to come off January 1st, did the OEB send any kind of a directive to LDCs regarding that 8%?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. Can I get you that in writing order?
Yes, please, to the committee. That would be
Yes.
great. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. To the NDP, Mr. Tabuns.
A few things here. You say that you regulate hydro LDCs the way you regulate natural gas distributors.
I said it's the same general adjudicative process.
And the natural gas companies, do they ever get to rewrite your legislation to tell you what you can rule on and what you can't rule on?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
The natural gas companies don't have the ability to go to cabinet and say, there are things we don't want you to rule on. Does that come up?
No.
Okay. Are you going to be reviewing this plan? Are you going to be doing an assessment? Are you going to have hearings to determine whether it's good or bad for ratepayers?
We will comply with the legislation if and when it's passed. The legislation does not contemplate such a hearing.
No, so you won't actually be reviewing whether this is good or bad for ratepayers. You aren't regulating this particular scheme or structure, is that correct?
We're complying with the legislation when it's passed, or
All
if
right.
it's passed.
It's been said earlier today that this sort of financing scheme has been used before in the United States for different utilities. Are you familiar with the fact that it's been used in the United States before?
I'm only familiar with the fact that it has been used, but I can't really answer any detailed questions about the nature of the use or whether it compares.
Anyone here before us who can speak to that? Okay, so you can't speak to whether or not you'll be fulfilling the same role here in Ontario as utility regulators in the United States have fulfilled dealing with these particular schemes.
No, I can't.
Okay. Were you consulted? Was the OEB consulted on this piece of legislation?
The OEB provided technical advice such that the policies of the government could be carried out. So in our role as regulator, we were asked for implementation advice.
So how do we put a particular charge through? How are things going to be heard when they come up for hearings? But you weren't asked for an overall assessment of the framework before us?
No.
Okay. The debt that's going to be set up. It will be showing on Ontario Power Generation's books. It won't be showing on the Government of Ontario's books. Is that consistent with your